or if it's yours.
Hello, and welcome to the Community Research Academy this afternoon. I thank all of you for attending. And I know we don't have a very large audience today, but we have an audience who's committed and interested in research. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce you to Dr. Philip Alcabes. He studied the history, ethics, and policies of public health, in addition to his book, Dread, How Fear and Fantasy Have Fueled Epidemics from the Black Death to the Avian Flu. Professor Alcabes' essays on public health topics have appeared in the American Scholar and the Chronicle of Higher Education Review, among other publications. His work on AIDS and tuberculosis policy has appeared in many peer-reviewed journals, including the Lancet, Journal of Infectious Diseases, and Social Alternatives. Professor Alcabes was on the faculty at Albert Einstein School of Medicine, Yale School of Medicine, and NYU School of Medicine, where he conducted epidemiological research on AIDS and other community-acquired infections, and published extensively before joining Hunter's Urban Public Health faculty in 1999. Without further ado, I will introduce you to Dr. Philip Alcabes. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. It's always a pleasure to be here. Maybe you could just say your names and what brings you here. Agnes, I know, but the others. So, anybody want to start? Phyllis?
Okay, I'm Phyllis Herbert. I'm from the Christian Fellowship Seventh-day Adventist Church. I am always support of these initiatives whenever Dr. Phillips presents them. Because our church is a very active church in the community, and everything that I gather from presentations, I'll bring them back to the church, and we use them in our community to help our church members and community at large.
Great. Deborah? Deborah Hicks?
Hi, I'm Dr. Deborah Hicks. I am retired teacher, and I'm interested in the project, or at least the conversations that we've been having about community and assessing and evaluating. And I'm definitely interested today in terms of grant writing. I was always weak at that. So I hope to get something that's, helpful to me in that aspect. Thank you.
Sure. And Sheila Davis.
Hi, I'm Sheila Davis from Church Women United in Brooklyn, also from Friendship Baptist Church, where Pastor Craig Gaddy is the pastor. And I'm always interested in information that I could bring to the church and to Church Women United in Brooklyn. So
Great. So this is what I'll do. I will talk I'm not going to lecture at you because there's only a few of us and we're not in a lecture hall. So let me talk a little bit about the research grant reviewing process as we do it at the center, the Clinical Translational Science Center at Weill Cornell. That's how I know Dr. Phillips, and see if I can animate some of the issues in community-based research that I think deserve more attention, especially from community people, from people who have experience in the community and are aware of the research process, so that the research process stops just being like guys in white medical coats, deciding what they need to know and enrolling people to be quote unquote subjects, and turns into something much more like community participation with medical people, so that people in the medical industry know what it is that people in the community want to find out about their health. So that's my aim. I thought to do this, I'll use an illustration of a proposal that we received, the Clinical Translational Science Center Community Advisory Board, of which I'm privileged to be a member, reviews proposals for funding. And so this proposal had to do with COVID and people with rheumatoid arthritis. So rheumatoid arthritis is an autoimmune disease that, as the name sounds, affects the joints, but it's very, it's painful and degrades the joints. It's a very serious disease. And the question, a reasonable question in this day and age, was, does COVID make things worse? So what they proposed to do, and this was proposed by a young physician researcher,
Mhm.
what they wanted to do was was to take.
How was the treatment?
Sorry? Oh, I'm sorry, I heard something, but maybe that was just an unmuted.
Yes, I just muted everyone.
Okay. Oh, all right, thanks. So what they wanted, so they have people with rheumatoid arthritis come to this clinic, actually with different forms of rheumatic diseases, autoimmune diseases, come to this clinic, apparently. And they were gonna take people who come to this clinic and then find out which of them test them, find out which of them has had COVID and which not. And then they were going to ask them to report flare-ups of their rheumatic condition. You can imagine it. So flare-up is pain and swelling, and so fair enough. But they knew something. You can imagine this. So let's say you're somebody who's very sensitive to her health and from day to day, and you've been diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis in the past, and you know that you've had COVID. You might become much more likely to report trouble when in the past, maybe this was something you would have just kind of ignored, but now you're more sensitive to it. That's probably happened to all sorts of people, including those of us who don't have rheumatoid arthritis. At certain times, I've certainly been more sensitive to my health day by day, especially in the early days of COVID. If I had a little bit of a headache or a little sore throat from allergies or something, I would have ignored it. But with COVID, like everything just seems so, possibly profound. So what they were going to do to avoid this problem was not tell the research subjects why they were asking them questions. And can I, Agnes, can I share my screen?
Yeah, you should be able to.
Okay, so let's see. Yeah. So this is the way proposals come into us: Clinical Translational Science Center, Funding Awards Committee. And this is from somebody who was at a doctor at Hospital for Special Surgery. Okay, so they're talking here about systemic rheumatic diseases, or SRDs. Basically, that's rheumatoid arthritis or some other autoimmune conditions that affect systemic, meaning affect the whole body's physiology. And they're worried, they want to know, not crazily, if infection with the COVID virus, SARS-CoV-2, could make things worse for such people. and also and reciprocally, whether rheumatic problems could make COVID worse. And oh, I forgot this part when I was introducing this. And they wanted to know, well, now that there are vaccines, are the vaccines making things worse? So, but they're worried about this problem that they know that there could be different awareness, that the fact of having had COVID or the fact of having been vaccinated might make people more likely to report symptoms than they normally would be. So they don't tell them. They don't tell the patients who are their research subjects why they're asking what they're asking. So let me just ask you, what do you think about that? Reasonable way to do the science? Like you have to, you don't want the result to be contaminated by the mental bias of the research subjects. What do you think?
So wouldn't you think it's the kind of study you do, it's more qualitative?
No, there's a quantitative part that I'm not bothering you with. The quantitative part, I had a problem with. I wasn't sure they actually knew how to do the accounting, as it were, the statistics.
Right.
But that's always a problem. That's always something to worry about. And if you're writing a proposal, you want somebody to take a look at the statistics, at the data analysis part, to make sure it's all kosher, legit, that it's done right.
But wouldn't interviews be helpful before and after?
So that's what they're doing. They're interviewing people,
Yeah. So
and
that's
saying, have you had they're actually giving them a questionnaire. Have you had a flare? And what were the symptoms?
So then help me reframe your question then. I'm not sure.
So I want to know what you think about this research. Good idea, bad idea, good way to do it, not a good way to do it. This isn't a test. I want to know what you think.
So we're looking to see if COVID adversely affects RA.
And particularly vaccination.
And the treatment makes it
infection
bad
with the
too.
virus or COVID or the vaccination, especially vaccination, whether it makes rheumatic diseases worse, rheumatoid diseases worse.
I think it's a good question, considering we're in the nascent stages of discovery.
I agree. Good question. Anybody else? Yeah. What else?
Okay, I am thinking that's a good idea because there are a lot of seniors who have taken the vaccine, so to speak, and they may have results that they didn't have before. Flare-ups.
Yeah.
They didn't have before, and they want to see what causing this flare-up. If it's caused by the vaccine, or since they have they already had the arthritis, whatever. But you're looking to see if it gets worse after the vaccine is what you're looking for.
Right. That's basically.
Or the vaccine have anything to do with with their condition, whatever.
Okay. So we seem to agree that this is an important medical question to ask.
Yes.
Yeah, that it is. Yeah.
So does it trouble you that all of the people they're studying are people who are patients at special surgery or Weill Cornell patients somehow at one place or another, and they already have systemic rheumatic diseases that nobody in this research they're not asking this question of people who have been vaccinated but don't have rheumatic conditions.
I think you should use other people outside of Cornell.
Great.
And
great. I did too. I thought, so why do you think that?
Okay, because you don't want to have any biases there.
So what's the bias what's the bias you're thinking about?
Well, I don't think of any particular bias at the moment.
Okay, just generally. Oh, that's a great point. So
Yeah.
I was worried about that too. So I have to tell you, I shot this proposal down. I thought it was terrible. And that was one reason. So good for you. One reason was this population, these are people who have been going to hospitals for special surgery or one of the other Cornell hospitals for a while. The subjects included very, very few people who are non-white. And obviously, if there are people who can afford to travel and get regular medical care, there are people who have insurance. So I felt the same way, that this is a selected sample. There must be lots of people with rheumatic disease, systemic rheumatic diseases in the community. Why not go to the community instead of just the patients who happen to be in front of you? So that was a really great point. Not only because it potentially introduces a bias into the scientific analysis, but because why do the research if it's only going to apply to a select group of people, if your findings will only apply to a select group of people? I want research that's community-based, that goes to the community and says, let's find the people with rheumatoid arthritis and other people with systemic rheumatic diseases and ask this question of all of them, or at least of a representative sample of those people in the community, not just of those few of them who kind of get filtered into our clinic. So I also, and then as I said, I was concerned that they didn't really have a very good way of doing the analysis, but that can always happens a lot, particularly, by the way, with physician researchers who don't themselves know how to do data analysis, and they get some graduate student to plan the data analysis for them, and that person doesn't exactly know what they're doing. So you can make a note to yourself for when you're involved in community-based research, find a good statistician, data analyst. There are people who will help you, but find a good one because like with everything else, if you're going to do something, you might as well do it well. The other thing, the thing that really troubled me, that for me was a deal breaker, was that they were going to lie to the patients, to the research subjects. They were planning to tell them that the purpose of this research, let me find the exact wording that they gave. The purpose of the research was to study their systemic rheumatic problem, not to study the effect of vaccination against COVID. So let me see what I wrote. So here's where I said, it plans to expend no effort seeking to assemble a widely inclusive research sample. That's maybe a little bit jargony, but I'm getting at what I just said, like go to the community and get a representative sample. That's what I meant by widely inclusive. The study design has flaws. That was my concern about the plans for statistics. Worst, it involves dishonesty to subjects about the purpose of the research. And I said the investigators should be ashamed of themselves. I don't know if they were ashamed of themselves, but I hope they got my message. So I felt, yeah, this is a timely question, important question. But as I said, it has this, so two things. One, I already said, it doesn't have an inclusive sample. It doesn't go to the community. The second, it doesn't actually talk to people. They're giving people this questionnaire. One of you said they should interview them. That's what I thought too. Find out, it may be that in this horrible time that we're all living through, they do have particular new needs, but those needs are not new flare-ups of their rheumatoid arthritis. If you're asking questions of these subjects / patients, why not find out if they've got what they need for themselves in all areas of health, including social ones and psychic ones. And then here's what the researchers said their plan was. This is the quote: subjects will be told this survey will evaluate their mental and physical health during the pandemic. This terminology, this is what the researcher is saying, this terminology accurately reflects the range of questions being asked, while at the same time will minimize reporting bias, that's what you correctly noticed that there would be, by keeping subjects agnostic to our particular interest in vaccinations. So I said, yeah, I got the agnostic part, but you can't lie to people. That's just not done. That's just not okay. I can't say it's not done. Physician researchers do it all too much, but it should not be done. So if the research is going to be participatory, people have to know what their place is, what their part is in this participation. And then I have my concerns about the study design. And then last, the researchers are planning to study almost solely white people. 100 non-Hispanic Black participants and 200 Hispanic participants are anticipated out of so I misremembered. They did have Hispanic participants, but basically no Black people. And I thought, well, that's not really a very good way for community-based research to provide results in a city as complex as New York City. So to summarize, these are, I'm sure their hearts were in the right place, that they wanted to generate information that would tell us something about the new state of affairs with COVID, in particular with COVID vaccination, and whether it might be a threat to people who already have some underlying systemic rheumatic disease. Quite reasonable, as I think we've agreed. But I'm saying, when you do this, you must be mindful of the actual communities in New York City, and not just take a convenient sample of some white and Hispanic people who are already at your door, in your clinic, but go and study the actual communities in New York City, find the people who have systemic rheumatic diseases, and then be honest with them about what you're studying and why you want to know it. Ask them what's going on for them. They are, after all, they are the experts on their own health and management of their own condition. So you, Dr. So-and-so, stop thinking you're the expert for everybody else, and ask people what's happening with them. So I use this as a case in point about how easy it is for well-educated physicians whose heart is in the right place about, getting the answers to questions of clinical importance, to just not think about involving the genuine full participation of real people who live in real communities in New York City. And
I don't know that I'm getting a hold of what you're saying, because that research would not be a true result. The result would not be true, because you can have a cross section of the people, some not included, and I think that's what's happening with research, and that's why the research sometimes not, it's not really, it's not all, it doesn't fit everyone.
Right,
Some research,
right,
some
very-
research sometimes,
yes.
because they just go take a couple of people and that's to take a broad section of the community. They
Right.
just take a few people and they have a result, and that's why some people are do not want to be involved in research and stuff like that, because they do not
So-
include everybody.
Not
in a
only
research.
not only do some people not want to be involved in research, some people are skeptical of the findings of research. And
Yeah.
I think legitimately so, because legitimately skeptical, even though the findings may be perfectly legit scientifically, when they seem to come from people who don't, doctors, researchers, who don't pay attention to the community, it's easy to think, well, I don't know if that applies to me. So I have argued that researchers must go out of their way to both to involve the community and to let the community know that it's being involved, so that, because otherwise you're just getting the answers for you, doctor. Like, you're just getting the answers because you want them. Because if you want the answers to actually be valuable to people, to the health of the public, you have to let the public know that you're doing this for the public, for the community, and not just for your own, to answer questions that have come to you. And you're also right that this is a chronic problem, and it's a very, very widespread problem. That it's a problem that has aspects to it of race, aspects of economic class, and aspects of, what shall I say, privilege. Of, if you want people who feel themselves to have been excluded to now feel included. And at a time like this, I think we're talking almost every day about getting people vaccinated against COVID. So you want people to feel included. Well, in order to do that, you actually have to include people. And I have a lot of sympathy for people who are reluctant to get vaccinated because they say, I don't have a lot of sympathy for people who say, I don't believe in science, or, but I have a lot of sympathy for people who are reluctant because they say, the government isn't doing anything for me. And now they are, suddenly they want me to come in and get vaccinated. Like, it's an article in the New York Times, I guess yesterday or today, that by some sociologists who have a really good point, that they talk to people who live in the St. Mary's houses, public housing in the Bronx, in South Bronx, and who, don't have heat, sometimes don't have running water, the roof leaks, and the front door doesn't lock, so people come and sleep in the stairways of their building, and they're saying, and they're like dodging people with guns and crime, and also trying to keep their families going. And this isn't the biggest problem they have, and they're saying, yeah, I'm not against vaccination in general, but this isn't the biggest thing that in my life. And also, what is the government doing for me? Like, why don't they fix the leak and get the heat to work? So I feel very sympathetic to people in communities who are accustomed to seeing the medical establishment as excluding them. And therefore, if you want people to be part of a public effort, people have to feel included. It's also the decent thing to do. And on those bases, I think the Community Advisory Board of the CTA, of the Clinical Translational Science Center, has been really trying hard to educate doctors. I hope Lula May agrees with me about this. Dr. Phillips agrees with me. That
I agree.
we're trying to educate doctors about how to think differently, how to get their minds out of their clinics and recognize that the community has needs that they may not know about, and the community has wants information that goes beyond what the doctor wants.
That,
And that,
doctor, if they would get rid of the disparity and move forward, then you'll have a better,
oh, right.
a
Right,
global
right,
relief,
exactly.
whatever,
Exactly. And that these disparities emerge in part. So being unhealthy, I teach public health, as you might have gathered. And one of the maxims of public health is that communities can't be as powerful as they would like to be when they're unhealthy. This is what Frantz Fanon was writing, and it's what Che Guevara said. It's like, this is a pretty old idea. Like, if you want communities to be able to get their needs met, the first thing is they have to be healthy. I teach my students about the people's free medical clinics that the Black Panthers ran in the 1960s. It was based on that same idea. That the community has to be healthy to start with. If the community is not healthy, then all of those other, then acquiring the privileges, acquiring rights becomes that much harder. So whether you're looking at this as in a medical way, or you're looking at it in a social reform way, it's just essential to include community people and community involvement, and be aware of what community people think their needs are, and not just what the doctors think the community needs or should need. I think I want to, boy, I've used up too much time. Let's see what you have to say before we run out of time. Anybody?
America has a long history of betrayal for people, especially people of color and Native people. And what you're saying, hits me the pit of my stomach, because it's about a trust issue. We've used this systemic poverty, and the blame of how poor people eat cannot be just placed upon their shoulders, when historically the diet was poor because they were poor. And then you introduce them to new foods, it becomes out of their reach, because again, it's a mindset that's generational. It affects economy, it affects social status, and it's a retraining and a retooling of thinking. But for the idea that often experiments have been conducted that that were not ethical, and I'm not talking about the grand ones, I'm even talking about smaller scale ones, and we see the results of who benefits from it. So I have to give an example. No one gave a daggone about AIDS hitting Haitians and Africans, because Africans and monkeys brought it over, until Rock Hudson got it. And as it hit Hollywood and the rest of, excuse the expression, white America, then everyone, there was a cure. So now we're looking at the COVID, and as it spreads widespread, then there's an interest in treating all the people. But I ponder, if it just was a small group, would the government be so hasty to make everyone become, vaccinated? And well, I'm for vaccinations. I'm for vaccinations.
I have to take slight exception, because I was concerned about AIDS before Rock Hudson died. But it's true.
But I'm saying, I'm talking about perception in the community,
right?
Not your totally community, but my community, because there was a lot of blame back. There was blame for subgroups. Right. Oh, the gays. Oh, the Black. Right.
So
and we felt very isolated and helpless back then, until the grander scale and the larger group became involved. It's like, oh, now you're interested in us. You don't care that we're not dying anymore. Same thing with the narcotics. Same thing with narcotics. For us, it was incarceration. Now it's treatment that is reaching a larger group.
Yeah, and it's all too common a pattern. When I started researching AIDS in 1983, I think, maybe, or something like that. 83. So it was very new. And when I would go to talk to people about AIDS, a lot of Black Americans, Black New Yorkers, would say, this has got to be created by the government to kill Black people. Now, it was not created by the government.
For sure, that's right.
But I said, I understand why you think that. I don't agree with you, but it sure looks like it's intended to kill certain people who aren't wanted.
That's right.
And that the government isn't really interested in doing very much. And I also agree with your accounting of history. You really have to read Harriet Washington's book. Do you know Harriet Washington's book, Medical Apartheid?
I have it in my house.
Oh, good.
I haven't
Yeah.
read it all. I've skipped it over the years.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So, because that book, I make my students read it because it's really the accounting of
Mhm,
the American medical industries
mhm,
making use of Black bodies
mhm,
to help the everybody, but
Mhm.
particularly the privileged.
mhm,
And you know, I actually like want Harriet. I'm friendly with her. I want the author, and I would like her to update it because the book is
Mhm.
15 years old and
Yeah.
lots has happened since then.
Mhm.
That the problem hasn't stopped.
Nope.
And so here we are. We're, so here we have in 2021, we have a young researcher from the Hospital for Special Surgery who doesn't think about the problem that she's going to do research on the COVID vaccine and systemic rheumatoid diseases. And it doesn't occur to her that she should be including Black people.
Mhm.
And that she should have a representative sample of New Yorkers and not just white people and Hispanic people.
Mhm.
That has to occur to people. They have to think about that. They have to learn to think about it. And it's really there's really a double there's a double task for community people and I don't know, what should I call myself? Allies of community people.
Well, I also think researchers need not be afraid of the community because
Well,
that
right, to
also
get
limits
researchers to
their outreach and their testing
get
and
researchers
their
to go to community
population.
and also to get communities to start their own research projects.
Mhm.
So to take your point about AIDS, one of the first significant things that happened in about 1986 was that members of the gay community started doing their own research. And
Mhm.
they started agitating with the government to allow some research. It was really the first community-based research that came from the community, where community people went to the doctors and said, we're going to do this. They recruited some doctors to work with them. And it's a really important model. And so I think one of the things that motivates Dr. Phillips and me, and I think we can speak for the rest of the community advisory board, right, Lula May, that we would like more people in the community to come up
You're
and say
right.
that we want this research done. You may not think it needs to be done. We think it needs to be done.
Mhm.
Doc, my concern right now, as we are talking about something involved with COVID, my concern is people are being forced off the job if they are not vaccinated. And if you are the government is saying they're trying to help people, poor people, and because already they have problem paying their rent and the daily living, and if they are put out of a job
Yeah.
because they do not want to be vaccinated, what are you doing? You're putting them into the bar, you're putting them into what category are you putting them in, really? I think that's his disadvantage to the underprivileged people who are not privileged, is a disadvantage. And
So
people
I
should
agree
have
with you.
people should have choices. I'm not against the vaccine at all, but people should have choices, because the great I am, he gave us choices,
So
and
I agree with you.
he
but-
gave us choices. So why is it so strict that people don't have choices? Because you know.
I agree with you on many, although not all of your points. But this question of mandatory vaccination is very, very complicated. And maybe we should schedule a special session because it's already after 3, but maybe we should schedule a special session to talk about that, if that's okay with Dr. Phillips and Agnes Chica. We could do that and just talk about the complications. I was on I'm a member of the human rights faculty at Hunter College, and we had a webinar that was very interesting about this. Like about vaccination, mandatory vaccination. It's a very complicated question. You want people to be vaccinated. On the other hand, you don't want people who depend on this work to lose their jobs. And how do you think about, how should we as a public think about balancing those questions? But let's see if there are other points, since I don't want to keep people too long. Are there other points about the research? And then maybe we'll schedule a session on vaccines.
I just wonder how this could even get past peer review. I mean,
well, it didn't. No, it didn't. Thanks to the community advisory board, this research did not get past didn't get past our peer review.
Yeah, because you didn't introduce all those variables. You didn't introduce all those flaws. So you know, you had me thinking, okay, pretty simple.
Oh, right.
I didn't even think the question population, but you know, when you put in those other variables, it makes a very ugly kind of by study, and you go, wow.
My question is like, how did it even get as far as to us? Somebody read this. So some young doctor wrote it, but someone read this, the chair of the department, and said, yeah, go ahead. That sounds good. Go ahead. And this is what I mean about the double task of community people in research. It's educating researchers,
right?
It's educating the community to be able to talk to researchers about what the community needs. And it's educating researchers about what they're not paying attention to.
Right. Oftentimes when there are studies and people make plans, it depends on their own selfish motivation that puts forth the plan. You know, you want to build a top ivory tower because it's for you. You're not thinking about the person who's not that tall for the apex of the ivory tower. So
I'm sure that's true. I like to give people the benefit of the doubt and believe that their heart is in the right place, but their mind isn't. That they're trying to not be selfish. They're trying to find out what would be helpful to people beyond themselves, but they just don't know how to think about what people are like who aren't like them. And this to me is part of the task.
Like you said before, that the medical schools need to really train these young doctors, especially the other doctor, that to look to see that people are people and people do have needs. Because the next person may have pain. Pain is pain. And I have pain. Pain is pain. We need medication for the pain. Some people's tolerances are higher than others, but pain is pain. And we need everybody to look at people as people, and not as some people are look at like an object, and some people are like subjects. We need people to be real people, and that people do have real needs.
Yes. Medical schools really need to step up. Many of them are doing better than they used to. They've become aware. They're doing an increasingly good job of enrolling minority students as future physicians. So that's good. Some of them are getting better at teaching about the lives of people who come from disadvantaged backgrounds, teaching about public health and what it really means, but they have a long way to go. And as you know, systems change slowly and they only change if they're pushed. So we have to push them.
Excuse me, it's not even just those who live here or who have lived here, but we're getting a lot of international people from far out places, from the hinterlands to the woods to the top of the mountain to the river. And with that is attached to custom and rituals, and these are the things you need to understand as you try
Yes.
to introduce your treatment, that they're not going to go for it. You know, if you're from a certain
Yes.
country, you may rely on the witch doctor more
Yes.
than you may on regular principled medicines or
Yes.
standard FDA medicines. And you're right. But I question how many doctors are researchers, or they're just doctors. Not all doctors have to be researchers.
No, but you know, alas, the medical school training increasingly emphasizes research, and medical residencies basically want the residents, the doctors in training, to do some research. Now, you're right, many of them are just full-time clinicians, but research is an increasingly important industry or sub-industry within the medical industry. And that's why I think we always have to pay attention to it, because the researchers can go back and teach the clinicians. The clinicians know what they know because they read the research results. So I feel like we can be important here by educating the researchers.
So are you saying that I should ask all my physicians what's the latest research that they've conducted?
No, because if you're lucky, they are full-time physicians. I feel lucky that my primary care doc is a full-time doctor. She doesn't do research.
Mm-hmm.
But I know my daughter is a medical resident right now. And I know from what she tells me, I know, like, she calls me to ask statistics questions once in a while about some research that she's expected to do, even though most of what she's training in is clinical. They still want some research done. So this is another big question, as like, it could be another whole session. This might be something that Liz Cohn could talk about, Dr. Phillips, if she has time, like how the burgeoning of research in the medical world. But I would come back.
I think that's a good idea, Philip.
So I would come back and do a session on vaccines if you want. It's 3:10. So Agnes, where are we?
We're good on time. We usually end around 3:30.
Oh,
But
okay,
I think that
so we do have
class,
time.
we can
No,
do
I
a whole
didn't-
class on that, actually.
I think it's a great idea.
What? Oh, to do
Yeah.
a session on vaccines.
Yes.
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 Yeah.
Go
Because
ahead.
we were actually looking for someone to do like a civic presentation. So maybe you can maybe host one of our civic presentations on vaccine hesitancy, and it goes
When
out
is
to the
that?
community at large.
When would that be?
We would schedule a date. It's up to you.
Oh, okay.
Your availability. Yeah.
Agnes, did you say vaccine empathy? Did you say
No,
that?
hesitancy.
Oh, hesitancy, because
Yeah.
empathy would be an interesting title as well.
Wouldn't it? Empathy is such a neglected area. So in some way, that's what all of you have been talking about here in the context of research, right? Can researchers summon to themselves the human empathy to recognize that other people's lives are different from theirs and incorporate that into how they do their research?
That could be an interesting title for the next civic or something. Vaccine hesitancy and empathy, how the two correlate.
Yeah, great.
Stay
Yeah.
tuned.
Yeah. And I think, we could that way, if we wanted, we could talk beyond vaccines, just about the problem of researchers who don't have empathy, don't inspire the confidence of the public. And so if you want people to get vaccines, or if you just want people to come for cancer screening or diabetes screening, that the public has to feel that you want to do something for them, and that it's not just you're collecting data.
But also, who wants to know? So the young lady who
Yeah.
spoke of the vaccines being mandatory, you're thinking either you go to work or you don't. So if you don't take the vaccination, what do? You not go to work? Who are the players? You have the economists, you have sociologists, you have medical, you have, and all these players are looking at that vaccine as the tool that they need for their needs. So even in that research that you just spoke of, what was the doctor's aim in promoting Moderna and finding out actually does it impact on arthritic pain?
Yeah, it's a good question.
Who are the players?
Yeah, that's a very nice question to ask, very useful question to ask. Like who has a stake in this? Who's interested in this? And
Who are the stakeholders?
usually it's a set of powerful forces like pharmaceutical companies, vaccine manufacturers, medical centers, the medical research industry, which has a lot of money. And the question to ask is, are the people who don't have power at the table? Do they get to say what their real needs are? And that's what I mean about educating doctors, educating researchers. It's about that. It's about educating them about how to you can't make people feel empathy if they don't feel it, but they can know that they're supposed to. They can learn that they're supposed to think about others.
Right.
And
I think
the dilemma.
The vision. When I was little, I'm old enough to remember, the pictures of the Soviet Union and the tanks running through the streets. And I used to say, "Mommy, are they coming to our block?" And I think that's what happened with the vaccine. Tanks just rolled in. We're unawares, and no one had a viable solution. It seemed like it was a guessing game, and no one wanted to get caught up in oops, my mistake. So we're still suspicious at this, even at this beginning. It's only been a year. It's been a year.
Right.
It wasn't something that we had time to think about. It was thrust upon people, like those Russian tanks invading Poland or Czechoslovakia or the Ukraine, just rolling down the streets, and they're there. And that's what this, it seems like an imposition more than a health treatment.
And partly it can seem like an imposition when the medical system and the government public health system isn't customarily doing something for people. So suddenly they're here. Like
it's not right
here today. So I think that I can tell you that some of the research we review at the CTSC is fairly thoughtful about communities, actually is active in enrolling people directly from community-based organizations. But it's I don't know, Lula May, would you agree it's kind of a minority viewpoint among doctor researchers?
Yes, I would.
There's a way that we have a long way to go. We have more to
do. We really do. And you know something, Philip, you have just inspired me. You've just made my mind open. I'm thinking my mind is going, we need to do a series. We need to really open this discussion up to the community.
Yeah.
And really, and maybe it might be better to do it in the evening rather than during the day. Really hear the voice of the people in the community. I think that would be so insightful. And I think the community needs it, and we need it.
Yeah. So maybe in the spring, it would be a good idea to do sessions like this in the evening and try to get more people. I think that, look, the people who are here will tell others. You've already told me that you take this back to your churches, and like, that's important. But
it's very important.
Yeah.
And after Omicron, there'll be probably Omega, there's be something or the other.
Yeah.
It's timely.
Right. There's still more letters to go.
Yeah. Yep.
Sad, but true.
Yeah.
Well, I learned. Thank you.
And since I mentioned Harriet Washington, I didn't come with, I don't have my copy with me, so I can't hold it up and show you. But she wrote a book, I think it just came out this past spring, called Carte Blanche. That's about, that's a little bit of updating to medical apartheid. It's about the excluding people from medical research with more recent information. And it's more about the ethics of medical research, and that might be interesting. Carte Blanche by Harriet Washington.
Agnes can send out the names of those two books.
Yeah.
Harriet's books to everyone in the class.
Yeah, good.
Yeah, I'll send them along with the recording, any information.
And I'm gonna put Harriet Washington in touch with Lula May, and maybe you can even get to hear from Harriet. She's a super
Oh,
inspiring
great.
speaker.
Great.
Or maybe she and I have sometimes done programs together because we have slightly different views, but anyway, you'll figure it out.
Mm. Mm.
Hey, that sounds great.
This was different. I didn't expect this. I'm pleased the way it turned out.
Oh, good.
Thank you.
I really, really want people to I want to demystify this research process. I think part of why it's easy for researchers to not include the community is that it's easy for people in the community to think, oh God, it's this big mystery and you have to have a medical degree or a PhD to know how to do it. And look, it's not a big mystery. You know, people with MDs or PhDs aren't necessarily smarter than you, or well, I might have one of those, but they're not necessarily smarter, and they're not necessarily trained. They are trained, which is what the degree means, but they're not necessarily trained in some of the most important aspects of health for the community. And I really, really want people in communities to know that they have what's needed to be involved in research because they know what's needed.
I have a
Oh, somebody started to talk. Oh, so
I think that was Miss Herbert. Sorry.
pardon?
Were you saying something, Miss Herbert?
Yes, I was. I just get unmuted. Yeah. Okay, I was saying, addressing the doctor. He was saying that not only MDs or PhDs can start a research group, and I would like to find out what is a protocol in starting a research group. If I would like to have an idea for research, how would I go about that? Promoting that idea about a research.
So I actually don't know the answer to that, but I bet that Dr. Phillips knows.
Yes, I'm gonna put her in touch.
Yeah, and I know that I live in the Bronx, so I know that that the Bronx, I forget the exact name. It's Bronx Health Network. Is that right, Lula May? What
Yes,
Bobby
there's
does?
yes.
Yeah, that they work with medical centers, but they bring research ideas, and that's what you want to have happen. It's true that in order to get funding for research, you usually need somebody with an MD or a PhD to be involved. My point is, you don't need them to think of the idea. You don't, and they won't have all of the awareness. And what I really want is for people in communities to come and say, yeah, you want us to find out about the Moderna vaccine. What we want to know is, what's the air pollution doing to us? Or what's the violence that isn't being stopped in the streets doing to us? And that to find out what communities' priorities are, and to organize the research around actual priorities of real people in real communities, not just what somebody in a white coat thinks needs to be discovered. So this is where Dr. Phillips is an expert.
I have to speak. I really think that community involvement in research is essential. And the only way a community is going to change is they have to work towards that change that they envision, that they see, and working with the experts. So I think this is the beginning of something very, very good, very important. And I'm going to start to talk to people and see exactly what we can do. Perhaps even to develop some type of mentorship, a community program, something has to be done. And so we will start working on that as well.
Yeah,
Definitely.
that's a great idea. That's a terrific idea.
So this is the beginning of something great. Philip, I enjoyed your presentation. It just opened my eyes, opened my mind, opened my thinking caps. Thank you so very much.
Thank you. Thank you. It's always a pleasure.
Oh, thank you. And I thank all of the participants for taking time
Yeah,
from your
thanks.
busy schedule. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks to everybody.
Thank you very much, Doc.
And Lula May, I hope I'll see you in person one day.
Soon, soon, yes.
Thank you.
Thank
Right.
you.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
Okay, good night.
Okay. Good night. Bye-bye.